What if your marriage of over 3 decades was suddenly destroyed by an affair? For most, the only option is a painful divorce. But what if you could sue the person who broke up your marriage and win millions? What if a jury decided the destruction of your family was worth a staggering $9 million penalty? Not against your cheating husband, but against his mistress. This isn't a hypothetical question, and it's not the plot of a movie. This is the incredible, true story of how one woman from North Carolina used a rare, controversial, and nearly forgotten law to seek a form of justice that left the country speechless. This is the story of Cynthia Shackelford, a 60-year-old woman who, after more than 30 years of marriage, found her life turned completely upside down. But instead of just accepting defeat, she took a stand that resulted in one of the largest verdicts of its kind. Her case forces us to ask a tough question. Can you really put a price on a broken heart? And more importantly, should the law even try? We're going to break down the obscure law that made this all possible, walk through the dramatic court case, and explore the fallout of a verdict that sent a powerful message about the sanctity of marriage in the modern age. Imagine your marriage of over 30 years is destroyed by an affair, but instead of just divorcing your husband, you sue his mistress, and a jury hands you a staggering $9 million. This is the incredible true story of how one woman used a rare and controversial law to seek justice, and it will make you question everything you thought you knew about love, law, and revenge. Before the lawsuit, the headlines, and the affair, there was simply the marriage of Cynthia and Alan Shackelford. They were married on December 23, 1972, and over the next 3 decades, they built a life together. They raised 2 children and, to the outside world, seemed like a stable, committed couple. Cynthia had dedicated her life to their family, giving up her own teaching career to support her husband and raise their kids. Alan, in turn, became a successful lawyer, pulling in a hefty income of over $300,000 a year at his career's peak. Their life was one of shared history, tangled finances, and big plans for the future. In an interview after the whole ordeal, Cynthia talked about how, even right before marriage unraveled, they were planning their golden years together. They had just finished a major renovation, adding a master suite to the first floor of their house. The idea was for them to live there as they got older, leaving the second floor for their children and future grandkids when they came to visit. This wasn't something a couple on the verge of divorce does. It was a careful planning of a couple who expected to grow old together under the same roof. Cynthia believed in her marriage. She described her love for her husband as deep and real. When asked about their relationship, she said, "I really loved him and I really thought he loved me." They'd go to parties together where he would introduce her as his better half. For Cynthia, their bond was a bedrock of her life, a partnership of more than 30 years that she had every reason to believe was solid. But just beneath the surface, a chain of events was about to be set off that would not only shatter their marriage, but also lead to a legal battle unlike almost any other. The foundation that had taken decades to build was about to be demolished, and it all started with a seemingly innocent professional connection. The third person to enter the Shackelford story was a woman named Ann Lundquist. At the time, she was a 49-year-old dean of campus life at Guilford College. Their connection started professionally. Alan Shackelford, as a lawyer, was providing legal services to the college where Lundquist worked. The affair didn't start with some dramatic, movie-style confession. It started subtly, almost boringly. It started with rides home from work. The affair is believed to have begun around November of 2004. What might have started as a friendly professional relationship slowly morphed into something more. The rides home got more frequent. The phone calls to the Shackelford family home became a regular thing, with Lundquist's name popping up on the caller ID again and again. Cynthia started to notice a pattern. Her husband was always taking Lundquist home, and Lundquist was always calling their house. As Cynthia would later say, her husband just brushed off her growing concerns. His reassurances were constant and placating. He would tell her, "Oh, she's just a friend. There's no affair. I love you." Those words, meant to calm her fears, instead just created a fog of confusion and denial. Cynthia was caught between her gut feeling, which told her something was deeply wrong, and the denials of the man she'd been married to for over 30 years. She had no clue he would wander, but the evidence was slowly, painfully, starting to pile up. The secret relationship went beyond just phone calls and car rides. Financial records began to tell a story of their own, with restaurant charges showing meals shared far from the family table. Emails and other messages, which would later become crucial evidence, passed between Alan and Anne. Cynthia described it as being like a Lifetime movie unfolding in her own life, where the other woman slyly used work in the guise of friendship to work her way into her husband's life and ultimately poison him against his own wife. The seeds of betrayal, planted under the cover of professional courtesy, had now taken root and were starting to choke the life out of a long-term marriage. The trust was gone, and Cynthia was about to move from suspicion to certainty. The turning point for Cynthia Shackelford came when her suspicions got too heavy to ignore. The constant phone calls, the weak excuses, and the emotional distance from her husband pushed her to find real answers. The discovery process was heartbreaking. It meant poring over bills that hinted at a life her husband was living without her, a life that included another woman. The final, crushing confirmation came when she hired a private investigator. The investigator's report was clinical and brutal, detailing the times he had seen Alan Shackelford spending intimate time with Lundquist and confirming the affair wasn't just emotional but physical, and that it was happening in their own home. Finding out about the affair was one thing, but Cynthia's next move is what makes this story so unbelievable. Instead of aiming all her anger and legal action at her husband during the divorce, she turned her focus to Anne Lundquist. She decided to sue her. But how is that even possible? This is where a rare and highly controversial legal tool called an alienation of affection claim comes in. So what exactly is alienation of affection? Often called a homewrecker law. It's a civil action that lets a spouse sue a third party for wrongfully and maliciously interfering in their marriage and destroying the love that existed between the spouses. This law is a relic of Old English common law, from a time when a wife was basically considered her husband's property. In that archaic view, if someone stole your spouse's affection, it was like they stole your property, and you could sue them for damages. While most states have gotten rid of these heart-bomb actions, seeing them as outdated and easy to abuse, North Carolina was one of only a handful of states that still allowed them at the time. On average, about 200 of these lawsuits were still being filed in the state each year, though very few became as famous as this one would. To win an alienation of affection case in North Carolina, a plaintiff like Cynthia had to prove 3 specific things. First, she had to prove that she and her husband were in a real, loving marriage. She needed to show evidence that genuine love and affection existed between them before the interference. Second, she had to prove that the love and affection in the marriage were, in fact, alienated and destroyed. And third, and this is the most critical part, she had to prove that the defendants, in this case in Lundquist's malicious acts, directly caused that loss of affection. The interference couldn't just be a side effect of a marriage that was already failing. It had to be the root cause of its destruction. Armed with this law, Cynthia filed her lawsuit on November 9th, 2007. She alleged that Anne Lundquist had engaged in a pattern of conduct designed to interfere with and destroy the loving relationship she had with her husband. This wasn't just about getting a divorce. For Cynthia, this was about accountability. She chose to use this law not just as a legal strategy, but as a way to send a message. As she said in an interview, she wanted to hold the person she felt was responsible for wrecking her family accountable for her actions. She felt she had a definite case. With plenty of evidence and witnesses to back her up, the stage was now set for a courtroom battle that would test the very definition of marital love and legal responsibility. The trial kicked off in March 2010. Over 2 days, Cynthia Shackelford's legal team laid out their case, painting a picture of a deliberate and malicious campaign by Anne Lundquist to tear the Shackelford marriage apart. The evidence was methodical and damning. They presented phone records showing the nonstop communication between Alan and Anne. They showed restaurant bills and other expenses that documented their time together. The emails between the lovers were laid bare for the court, revealing the depth of their secret relationship. But maybe the most powerful testimony came from the private investigator Cynthia had hired. He detailed his surveillance, giving the jury a timeline of Alan and Anne's meetings and confirming their affair had become physical inside the Shackelford family home. Cynthia herself took the stand, telling the jury about her long marriage, the life she had built, and the future she had planned before Lundquist got involved. Her argument was simple, and Lundquist didn't just stumble into a relationship with a married man. She actively chased him and systematically poisoned him against his wife. The case wasn't completely one-sided, though, even with one key person missing. Anne Lundquist, the defendant, didn't show up to the trial and didn't have a lawyer representing her. Her absence was a glaring hole in the proceedings. According to some reports, she later claimed she wasn't properly notified of the trial date. Her side of the story would only come out later in statements to the press. The story got even more complicated thanks to the husband, Alan Shackelford. Though he wasn't being sued in the specific case, his perspective was crucial. In an online post to a local newspaper, he offered a totally different version of events. He claimed his marriage to Cynthia had been on the rocks for years. He alleged that she had wanted to divorce him at least 2 years before he ever started a relationship with Anne Lundquist. His main claim was blunt and powerful. The marriage did not break up because of Anne Lundquist. This directly attacked the third and most important part of Cynthia's case, that Lundquist's actions were the direct cause of the marriage's collapse. Was Lundquist a homewrecker, or was she just a symptom of a marriage that was already dead? Cynthia flat out denied her husband's claims. In a later interview, she was crystal clear. "I never said I was going to divorce him." She pointed to their recent home renovation as proof of their shared future plans. This created a classic, she said, situation for the jury to figure out. They were faced with two conflicting realities. In one, a happy, stable marriage was maliciously destroyed by an outsider. In the other, a man in a dying marriage found comfort with another woman. The jury had to decide which story the evidence supported. They had to weigh the hard proof of the affair, the phone records, the investigator's report, against the fuzzy question of when the love in the Shackelford marriage truly died. This law is incredibly controversial. It puts a legal framework around personal betrayal, which makes a lot of people uncomfortable. Do you think a third person should be held financially responsible for a marriage ending? Or is the responsibility only on the cheating spouse? Let me know what you think in the comments below, because what the jury decided to do next was truly shocking. After weighing the evidence and conflicting stories, the jury came back with its verdict on March 16, 2010. They found in favor of Cynthia Shackelford. They ruled that Anne Lundquist was indeed liable for alienation of affection, as well as for criminal conversation, a related but separate claim for adultery, and for intentional infliction of emotional distress. But it wasn't just a verdict that was stunning. It was the amount of damages they awarded. The jury handed Cynthia Shackelford a judgment for a breathtaking $9 million. The award was split into two parts. First, they awarded $5 million in compensatory damages. This was meant to compensate Cynthia for the actual losses she suffered because of her destroyed marriage. This included the loss of her husband's substantial income, as well as money for severe emotional and mental distress she went through, plus her legal and medical bills. The second part was another $4 million in punitive damages. Punitive damages aren't about paying the victim back. They're about punishing the defendant for their behavior and, most importantly, deterring others from doing the same thing in the future. The sheer size of the verdict sent shockwaves through the legal world and the public. It was one of the largest awards of its kind in North Carolina's history. Even Cynthia herself was stunned by the number. Her goal, as she and her lawyer said, was to send a message. They wanted a number high enough to make would-be mistresses think twice before interfering in a marriage. In their eyes, the jury hadn't just paid back a wronged wife. They had made a powerful statement about the value and sanctity of marital commitment. Anne Lundquist, who was now the dean of students at a college in New York and living with Alan Shackelford, was completely floored. When the press reached her, her reaction was one of disbelief. "I don't have a lot of money," she said, "so where this $9 million comes from is kind of hysterical." She immediately announced she would appeal the verdict, arguing that the award was way over the top. The battle was won, but the war over the money and the principle behind it was far from over. The $9 million verdict was a huge moral and legal win for Cynthia Shackelford, but it immediately brought up a practical question. Could she ever actually collect the money? Anne Lundquist was adamant that she didn't have anywhere near that amount, calling the figure hysterical. Even Cynthia's own lawyer admitted that collecting the full $9 million would be tough, if not impossible. Huge awards like this are often reduced on appeal, and forcing payment from a person without those kinds of assets is an uphill battle. In May 2014, the North Carolina Court of Appeals heard Lundquist's appeal. The court ended up upholding the jury's verdict, cementing Cynthia's legal win. However, the public record gets pretty quiet after this. It's still unclear how much, if any, of the $9 million Cynthia Shackelford ever actually got. But for her, the case was never just about the money. It was about vindication. It was about having a jury of her peers listen to her story and validate her pain. The lawsuit, in a way, was a way to legally burn the scarlet letter on the chest of the person she blamed for destroying her family. The wider impact of the Shackelford case echoed across North Carolina and in legal circles around the country. It was a sharp reminder that these old heart-bomb laws weren't just dusty relics in the law books. They still had teeth, and they could bite hard. The case shined a spotlight on a growing debate. Should these laws even exist in the 21st century? Supporters argue they protect the marital contract and offer a way to get justice for devastating emotional and financial harm. Opponents, however, see them as outdated tools for public shaming and revenge, rooted in the misogynistic idea of spouses as property. For years after the Shackelford verdict, the law stayed on the books, but the tide was turning. In 2025, a bill, Senate Bill 626, was introduced in the North Carolina legislature with a clear goal: to finally abolish the common law actions for both alienation of affection and criminal conversation. The bill aims to modernize the state's family laws, arguing that these toward are archaic and no longer serve a just purpose. While attempts to repeal the law had failed in the past, the momentum seems to have shifted. As of early 2026, the ongoing discussion to abolish the very law that gave Cynthia Shackelford her $9 million victory is a testament to how legal and social views on love, marriage, and betrayal are evolving. The Shackelford case may very well go down in history as one of the last, and certainly one of the most spectacular uses of the homewrecker law. The story of Cynthia Shackelford is a captivating saga of love, betrayal, and a very unique brand of legal justice. For over 30 years, she lived a life she thought was secure, only to have it systematically torn apart. But instead of quietly accepting her fate, she fought back using a controversial law that many thought belonged in a history book. The jury's $9 million award was more than just money. It was a powerful, public statement on the value of marriage and the price of its destruction. Her case forced a difficult conversation that's still going on. Does a law born from the idea of people as property have any place in modern society? Or does it offer a necessary, if blunt, tool for accountability when someone suffers a profound personal injury? The state of North Carolina appears to be on the verge of answering that question for good, with lawmakers moving to abolish the very statute that made Cynthia's case possible. While the $9 million verdict made headlines around the world, the real question remains: can you truly put a price on a broken heart? And in the complicated, messy, and deeply human world of love and betrayal, should the law even try? If you found this deep dive into this incredible legal drama fascinating, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next exploration of unbelievable court cases. And let me know in the comments, do you think the alienation of affection law should be abolished, or should it stay as a tool for jilted spouses? I'd love to hear your take. Thanks for watching.